big fine, but a bigger message. Beijing takes aim at Taiwan-based company Far Eastern Group. When the chips are down, TSMC and Sony partner up to tackle the supply chain crisis. COVID crisis. Europe imposes ever tougher restrictions in a bid to stop a fourth wave. A caffeine hit. How Taiwanese coffee is brewing up a storm in Japan. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Beijing has slapped fines worth millions of dollars on Taiwan-headquartered Far Eastern Group for violations at the company's factories in China. While the penalties are officially about a series of breaches relating to safety and tax issues, Beijing has also made it clear that politics plays a key role. Bing Wang explains.
A move to undermine Taiwan's influence within China. Beijing has fined Taiwan-based conglomerate Far Eastern Group almost $14 million for multiple violations at its factories in China. Supposed infractions include environmental, occupational health, land usage, plant safety, fire safety, and tax issues. Far Eastern is no stranger to legal troubles. In Taiwan, the Supreme Court ruled against its subsidiary Asia Cement in a case regarding extending mining rights on indigenous Taiwanese land this September.
Cement industry like Taiwan Cement or Yanni, Asia Cement, we have a lot of catchments in Aboriginal areas, yes. By the way. So yeah, here again we have problems of environmental injustice.
It seems at least that the violations in China are relatively minor. But there is more to the dispute than meets the eye. Cross-strait tensions are involved. Earlier this month, China's Taiwan Affairs Council issued a directive saying that supporters of Taiwan independence will be held criminally liable for life. Far Eastern appears to be the first Taiwanese company in China's crosshairs, after Beijing promised to punish businesses and political donors with links to so-called Taiwan secessionists. Far Eastern donated about $2 million to Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party last year, making the company the party's largest single donor. The DPP is known for its pro-independence stance and strong criticism of Chinese aggression. China's state-owned Global Times shared further details regarding Far Eastern's punishment. They claim that Taiwan Premier Susan Tseng, one of the individuals named as a die-hard secessionist by Beijing, is in cahoots with Far Eastern. It said firms under Far Eastern also offered financial support to the premier. The Taiwanese government hasn't yet offered an official statement about the penalties facing Far Eastern. But it's clear China is now putting pressure on Taiwanese companies to minimize Taiwan's influence in the region. Facing ramped up military aggression and now economic penalties, Taiwan is being pressured from two sides as Beijing steps up its campaign of coercion. How the two sides act next could have lasting repercussions. Alex Chen and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Japanese tech giant Sony has stopped accepting orders for some digital cameras due to industry-wide supply chain problems. The unusual move ahead of the year-end shopping season is a result of a global shortage of semiconductors. It's been exacerbated by coronavirus outbreaks in Southeast Asia. The setback is another blow to the digital camera market, which has been struggling to compete in the age of smartphones. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC, recently announced plans to work with Sony to open a new plant in Japan. Ryan Ho-Kilpatrick spoke with Bloomberg opinion columnist Tim Culpen to find out whether a global chip shortage is compelling countries to set up their own manufacturing bases.
I do think that the US desire to be stronger in chips and the global supply chain shortage has made Japan feel a little bit left out, and also a desire, I think, within Japan to regain its lost glory. 20 or 30 years ago, it was a major player in semiconductors, and it's really fallen off. And so I think the government now recognizes that it's still got a chance. It wants to get back in the game. And that's why they're working to do so, to spend money and to lure companies like TSMC to set up shop in Japan.
At the moment, TSMC is also building a plant in Arizona, and there's talk of another one going up in Germany as well. So is this just the start of a wave of overseas expansion for TSMC?
I think we'll see 5 years from now more overseas fabs for TSMC than we do now, or versus 5 years ago. We shouldn't forget the fact that TSMC is still expanding in Taiwan. And I think what we'll see 5 years from now is TSMC will have a broader presence overseas naturally, because they're starting from a very, very low base. And so it can only grow from there. But I think we'll still see more than 90% of TSMC's capacity and all of its leading edge, the best possible capacity, being in Taiwan.
It's fairly clear to see how Japan and other countries stand to benefit from these deals, with TSMC sharing their expertise with them. But what is in it for TSMC itself and for Taiwan more broadly?
Well, in terms of Japan, Japan is an important partner with Taiwan in the electronics and semiconductor chain. People forget that they are still to this day a leading player in the equipment and materials. There's very important companies in Japan. Tokyo Electron is probably the most famous, but Japanese companies make a lot of the materials, the chemicals that go into semiconductors. So by setting up in Japan, TSMC can be much closer to that supply chain, can work very, very closely with its suppliers. There is a lot of reasons why TSMC could benefit from having a close relationship with Japanese companies and the government, and wants to build even closer relationship over the coming decade.
Is there any threat of Taiwan losing its competitive edge in this industry as TSMC expands overseas and shares its expertise in other places?
What TSMC can do is benefit from having factories in other parts of the world. In Arizona, for example, that's where they've decided to set up, in Arizona. There's 50 states of the US, they chose Arizona. It's no coincidence that Arizona is also a leading destination, or a leading place for Intel. So to set up shop right down the road from one of their major competitors, there's probably quite a few engineers from Intel that they might want to pick off. And the same could happen in Japan. There's engineers in Japan that they could pick up along the way. And if they were to move to Europe, they could probably benefit from some of the talent within Europe. That is something that I think is a reason why TSMC would go overseas. Yeah, in theory, by setting up shop overseas, including in China, they could lose a little bit of their talent overseas, but I think the reverse is also true. They could pick up talent wherever they go.
A U.S. warship is once again sailing through the Taiwan Strait. The USS Milius was spotted on Tuesday conducting what the U.S. says are freedom of navigation operations. A U.S. military official said that the guided missile destroyer was in a routine Taiwan Strait transit through international waters in accordance with maritime law. China often denounces such transits in the Taiwan Strait and accuses Washington of trying to stir regional tensions. Taiwan's export orders posted a record high for the month of October, the 20th consecutive increase in monthly year-on-year figures. It rose 14.6% from a year earlier to $59.1 billion as global demand for technology products remained strong. However, the increase was below the predicted figure. The Economics Ministry said orders were dragged down by ongoing supply chain issues and lack of raw materials. Elsewhere, Taiwan's employment figures rebounded for the fourth consecutive month. Unemployment peaked at a 10-year high in June as a COVID outbreak forced many businesses to close. Today marks Taiwan's 19th straight day without any new locally transmitted cases of COVID-19. The country's push for full vaccination is progressing. 77% of the public have received at least one dose of a vaccine, while over 47% have now been fully vaccinated. Meanwhile, the Australian government has given provisional determination status to Taiwan's domestically developed Medigen vaccine. This is the first step towards approval for the vaccine in Australia. Countries across Europe are imposing even more restrictions, from lockdowns to mandates, in a bid to keep a fourth wave of COVID under control. But many are pushing back, revealing deep divisions over how to navigate life with coronavirus and how to balance personal freedoms with protecting people's health. James Chater reports.
Silence once more in the streets of Vienna. Austria re-entered a full national lockdown on Monday after daily deaths from coronavirus tripled in recent weeks and hospitals reached breaking point. On top of that, a new government order that COVID vaccines will be compulsory from February next year.
Naja, das ist wie Luxury Gefängnis. Also, es ist so. Also, es ist sicher beschränkte Freiheit und also für mich persönlich geht es nicht so gut. Ich meine, psychologisch vor allem.
Austria is not alone. Across Europe, soaring infections are seeing the reimposition of restrictions. But with a second coronavirus Christmas approaching, the prospect of yet more measures has brought societies to boiling point. In the Netherlands this weekend, streets ablaze and frustrations flaring. Violence in Dutch cities amid an ongoing partial lockdown has seen at least 5 officers injured and 3 demonstrators shot. Officials are describing it as an orgy of violence.
Wat we afgelopen weekend gezien hebben, dat is puur geweld. Onder het mom van we zijn aan het demonstreren. Dit heeft niets met demonstreren te maken.
In Croatia, Slovakia and the Czech Republic, broadening vaccine mandates and restrictions has led to outcry over impingements on freedom.
Borio se za ovu zemlju I slobodu građana ove zemlje, koja nam je sad itekako ukinuta ovim COVID potvrdama I nasilnim cijepljenjem.
The recent wave of cases in Europe has reignited debate over how best to balance individual freedoms with the protection of societies. From the EU, the sobering middle ground.
It's also very clear that peaceful demonstrations are a fundamental right, but under a public health emergency, certain rights can also be restricted.
But from others, a clear answer on where they stand.
Wahrscheinlich wird am Ende dieses Winters so ziemlich jeder in Deutschland, das wurde ja manchmal schon etwas zynisch genannt, geimpft, genesen oder gestorben sein.
On the ground, COVID continues to claim lives. But while the best way to balance competing interests remains unclear, one thing is certain. Across Europe, cracks in people's patience are beginning to show. Patrick Chen and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up after the break, an American Christmas parade turns into tragedy. Stay with us.
Taiwan 最有人情味的地方。
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. A reminder of our top story. Beijing has slapped fines worth millions of dollars on Taiwan-headquartered Far Eastern Group for violations at the company's factories in China, and also made it clear that politics has played a key role in the decision. Lithuania's foreign minister is on his way to the U.S. in the wake of China's downgrading of diplomatic ties with the Baltic country. Beijing's move was a consequence of Lithuania allowing the opening of a Taiwanese representative office. It's the first in Europe to use the word Taiwanese rather than Taipei. For more clarity on Lithuania's position with China and the U.S., I spoke to Marcin Józefski, a research fellow at the think tank Taiwan Next Gen Foundation.
The volume of Lithuanian exports to China in 2020 was valued at approximately $360 million. So if the deal with the United States goes through as announced, its value will be almost twice as much as what Lithuania has been able to get from its current exchanges with China. And even before the announcement of this export credit deal, we should bear in mind that the United States ranked much higher in the importance for Lithuania as an economic partner, being Lithuania's 7th largest trade partner and China ranking 22nd in the same list. So we're not even talking about the US filling in a void that might be left by China. We are talking about a significant upgrade to economic dealings.
So this appears to be a win-win situation. I mean, after all, Lithuania has pursued a values-based foreign policy. Is it ironic that China had wanted to, through the 17+1 group, foster closer relations with Eastern Europe and has ended up, in the case of Lithuania, pushing it away from China and closer to the US?
I believe that we are seeing in the cases of Lithuania and also in the case of Taiwan that China has really overestimated the impact that it can exert on its partners through economic statecraft. So one of the main exports that Lithuania has in its dealings with China is wheat. It's a low value added agricultural export. So there are clear parallels to be drawn between the recent bans on imports of Taiwanese fruit, pineapples, and later sugar and custard apples from Taiwan. So this only goes to show that the value-based model which you are mentioning might be increasingly attractive to countries specifically in Central Eastern Europe, Lithuania. As a country that is responsible for safeguarding the external border of the European Union, Lithuania is quite literally at the forefront of defense of democratic values and of the liberal international order. And I believe that countries like the United States recognize its crucial role in the EU, its crucial role within NATO. And Lithuania has experience facing authoritarian illiberal threats, not only from China, but as we see very clearly right now, also Russia and Belarus.
Police in the U.S. state of Wisconsin say they are drawing up homicide charges against a man suspected of plowing an SUV into a Christmas parade, killing at least 5 people and injuring 48. Louise Watt reports.
It was a scene of festive cheer. But a Christmas parade featuring a marching band in the U.S. city of Waukesha on Sunday turned deadly in an instant, as a car sped along the parade route and then into dancers, musicians, and other people. This mobile phone footage captures the horrifying moment from another angle. A young girl dancing in the street, and then the red SUV zooming past, narrowly missing her. Chaos followed.
Mom! Mom! Mom, get over here!
There's like 7 injured that way. There's so many down there.
What just happened?
Somebody just drove through.
I heard and saw the people being hit, but what you could do more than seeing is hearing, and just that sound was insane. So we got back towards the building we were standing in front of, and as he went by, it was like everybody keeps saying it was just kind of slow motion. It was just a lot of silence. You saw the people on the ground.
Police say at least 5 people have been killed and 48 injured. The dead include members of a dancing grannies club, a holiday fixture in Milwaukee for 40 years. On Facebook, the group posted that their members had been doing what they loved, performing in front of crowds in a parade, putting smiles on faces of all ages. Children are also among the critically injured. Police on Monday identified the suspect as 39-year-old Darrell Brooks Jr. They said he was leaving the scene of a domestic disturbance that had taken place just minutes earlier and was not being chased by police at the time of the crash. On Friday, Brooks had posted bail in a case relating to an allegation that he deliberately ran over a woman with his vehicle after a fight.
The subject was taken into custody a short distance from the scene, and we are confident he acted alone. There is no evidence that this is a terrorist incident.
For now, the main street of Waukesha remains a crime scene, with reminders of the Christmas parade abandoned and a community left saddened and stunned. James Rayner and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
The U.S. is considering sending military aid to Ukraine. That's as Russia is building up troops and equipment at the border, and Ukraine is warning that another invasion could happen as early as January. A build-up of around 100,000 Russian soldiers at the border has prompted Ukraine to hold a drill of airborne forces close to the capital, Kiev. Moscow blames increased tensions on NATO activities in the area. The U.S. is weighing new sanctions against Russia and is looking into sending military advisors and weaponry to Ukraine.
It's very important that the United States stand by Ukraine in our efforts to defend our sovereignty and territorial integrity in the face of the ongoing Russian aggression. And I appreciate the messages that were conveyed to us today by our American partners. We are grateful for the readiness of the United States to expand cooperation with Ukraine, including in defense and security sectors, to help Ukraine build its capacity to defend itself and also to deter Russia, to demotivate them from taking further aggressive actions. Thank you.
K-pop band BTS made history as they won the top prize for Artist of the Year at the 2021 American Music Awards. They are the first Asian act to win the grand honor at the AMAs. The South Korean artists captured all 3 awards they were nominated for. The group thanked their global fans, which they call the BTS Army. But the band's rapper Suga made a point of expressing their gratitude to their fans back home.
4년 전 이 AMA에서 저희가 미국 데뷔 무대를 처음 했는데 이렇게 아티스트 오브 이어를 받게 될 줄 정말 몰랐고 다 아미 덕분인 것 같습니다. 감사합니다, 아미!
NBA superstar LeBron James will serve a 1-game suspension for his role in an on-court scuffle in a game between the LA Lakers and the Detroit Pistons. James was ejected from Sunday's game after he elbowed Pistons center Isaiah Stewart in the face as they jostled for position, drawing blood. Stewart responded angrily and had to be held back more than once as he tried to confront James. Stewart was also ejected and has been given a 2-game suspension for escalating the altercation. He later received 8 stitches for his head wound. Taiwan may be known for its love of tea, but the local coffee industry has grown rapidly over the past decades. Now the country is gaining a reputation not just as a consumer, but also as a grower of coffee, with Japanese buyers especially keen to get a taste of Taiwan's coffee's unique flavors. Our partners at Radio Taiwan International bring you this story.
A recent Taiwanese short film about local coffee has increased its popularity in Japan. Taiwan's coffee plantations sit at various altitudes, from 200 meters to over 1,000 meters above sea level, and that creates a variety of exquisite flavors. Although there's a lot to love about Taiwanese coffee, its price tag is not one of them. Taiwanese coffee is usually 2 to 3 times more expensive than local coffee in Japan. Some might ask, why are Japanese consumers willing to pay such a high price? Nantou County official Chen Rongjun says this is partially due to colonizing Taiwan in the first half of the 20th century. Taiwan was once the largest coffee producer in Southeast Asia, so coffee enthusiasts in Japan love its unique flavor. Chen says that Taiwan is also one of the few countries that controls its coffee process from start to finish. Countries that consume the most coffee are usually at latitudes too high to produce their own coffee. In Taiwan, everything from growing and producing the beans, sales and marketing, and consumption are all managed in a seamless chain. This way, consumers can be sure they're getting a superb, fresh cup of joe.
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. We leave you with images of newborn polar bear twins in northern Germany's Rostock Zoo. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.